In 2015, I assumed leadership over a country operation in Indonesia, 900 people, a leadership team that was already thinning, and a market that was about to move against us. Within 6 months, half of that executive team was gone. I want to tell you what I learned that year, because it's the reason a diagnostic instrument called the Organizational Resilience Index exists. And it's the reason I'm making this video. Every executive team I talk to has an engagement score. Very few of them could tell me what to do with it. The reason for that gap, the reason the engagement number doesn't translate into action, is not because leadership isn't sophisticated enough or because the survey was administered badly. It's because the survey is measuring the wrong thing. That's what this video is about. Let me go back to the Indonesia experience for a moment. I had every standard instrument, an engagement survey with respectable scores, a talent review, performance calibration, a culture deck the region had spent 9 months building. None of it told me what was actually happening inside that team. The instruments measured how people felt about the company on a normal week. That's what engagement surveys are calibrated to do. They ask how connected people feel to their manager, how much meaning they find in their work, how they feel about their prospects. Useful data when the weather is normal. What I needed to know, what any operator running through a real crisis needs to know, was different. It was what those same people would do when the plan broke, what they would say to each other in the hallway after the meeting. Who would carry weight? Who would freeze? Who would quietly start updating their resume? Those are two different questions. And I had spent a career being handed answers to the first question, framed as if they were answers to the second. I want to strip a word of its poetry before we go any further. Resilience is not toughness. It is not endurance. It is not the ability to absorb suffering without complaint. Those are individual virtues. And I'm not saying they don't matter, but they're not what the ORI measures. Team resilience is different. Team resilience is the collective capacity to keep producing intelligent action while under load. That's the working definition every item on the instrument is built against. Every dimension we measure is a specific mechanism inside that capacity. If your team can keep making good decisions when the plan changes, you are resilient. If it cannot, no matter how strong the engagement number, no matter how motivated the individuals, you are not. Okay, so now we can talk about the 7 dimensions. The ORI measures 7 distinct dimensions. Each corresponds to a specific mechanism by which teams either absorb pressure or fracture under it. I'll take them one at a time. 1, optimism. Not positive thinking, nothing to do with attitude or affirmations. Optimism, as we measure it, is a team's collective habit of interpreting setbacks as data rather than as evidence of futility. Optimistic teams treat a failed quarter as diagnostic material for the next quarter. Pessimistic teams treat it as confirmation that the strategy was wrong, that the leader is wrong, that the market has moved on. Optimism predicts one thing very precisely: how quickly a team re-engages after a loss. Its absence shows up in postmortems that become blame allocations, and in new initiatives greeted with, "We tried this before." 2, emotional regulation. The team's collective capacity to carry pressure without dysregulating. In a regulated team, hard news lands with fly gravity and a request for more information. In a dysregulated team, hard news triggers scapegoating, compulsive urgency, or political retreat. Sometimes all 3 inside the same meeting. Emotional regulation predicts decision quality under time pressure, which is where most consequential decisions actually get made. Its absence shows up when leaders react rather than respond. And when people stop bringing bad news up the chain because they don't trust what will happen to it. 3, ownership and initiative. The threshold at which people move without being asked. High in resilient teams, low in fragile ones. This is not entrepreneurial hunger. I want to be clear about that. It's the disposition to close the distance between what needs doing and who is doing it. Ownership predicts the speed of response when the plan breaks. Because the plan always breaks somewhere no one has anticipated, and someone has to move before the meeting can be scheduled to authorize movement. Its absence shows up when everything roots upward for permission, and when middle management becomes a class of message passives. 4, flexibility. This is the team's capacity to hold plan and reality simultaneously, to update one when the other changes without treating either as betrayal. Flexible teams do not experience the reorganization as a repudiation of the last one. Rigid teams do. Flexibility predicts how well a team pivots when the strategy has to change, versus how much energy it will spend defending the strategy that no longer fits. Its absence shows up in the phrase, "That's not what we agreed," said often, and in the exhausting political work of announcing every course correction as if for an act of continuity. 5, social support. This is the lateral, load-bearing structure of the team. How much people trust their peers, lean on them, and absorb difficulty as a group, rather than as isolated individuals. Teams high in social support absorb shocks collectively. The team as a unit takes the hit, and no single person breaks. Teams low in social support push the shock onto whoever is closest to it, and lose their most conscientious members first. Social support predicts whether a difficult period produces attrition or absorption. Its absence shows up as silent quitting, and as a strange, quiet exit of the exact people you cannot afford to lose. 6, purpose and mission. The reason people show up when the incentives thin out. Not a poster on the wall, not a value statement, a lived, working answer to the question, why this? Purpose predicts effort in the ambiguous middle of a hard project, the long stretch after the launch adrenaline is gone and before the finish line is close enough to see. Its absence shows up when A players start looking for reasons to leave the moment the interesting work ends. Purpose is what keeps the door closed on that exit. 7, grit and perseverance. This is the team's ability to hold direction across a long horizon, especially when feedback loops are slow and the environment is offering no encouragement. Grit predicts multi-quarter execution against strategic goals. Its absence shows up in strategy churn, in the phrase, "we're refocusing," recurring every 6 months, and in the growing suspicion, inside and outside the organization, that this team doesn't actually finish things. So these are the 7 dimensions of the ORI. Each measures a specific mechanism inside team capacity under load. Together they produce what we call a resilience profile, which brings me to what the profile actually gives you and what it gives you that an engagement score cannot. An engagement number is a summary of feeling. A resilience profile is a map of load-bearing capacity. The map tells you 2 things a score cannot. First, and this is the one leaders find most useful, the map tells you where the team is going to fracture when pressure comes, not whether. Every team fractures somewhere, and that's not a moral judgment about the team. It's the physics of load-bearing structures under pressure. The question isn't whether the team will crack. The question is where and how far the crack will run before the team catches itself. If your flexibility is high and your emotional regulation is low, you will pivot fast and expensively. The strategy will change and the meetings around it will be chaos. But if your grit is high and your optimism is low, you will finish what you started, but every setback along the way will cost the team more energy than it should. These are patterns, and they are legible in the profile. The second thing the map tells you is where the work is. Culture work compounds when it targets a specific mechanism. It dissipates when it targets a general mood. A team with a social support gap does not need more engagement programming. It needs a redesign of how work gets distributed and how load gets shared. A team with an ownership gap does not need another town hall. It needs a rewiring of decision rights and a change in who is allowed to move without asking. The diagnostic doesn't tell you what to do, but it tells you what to work on. That's the difference between design and improvisation. Now, let me be direct about who these instruments are actually for. They're for leaders who have already run the standard tools and know something is missing. Usually those leaders can't name what's missing. They know engagement scores are predicting behavior. They know performance reviews are describing history, not capacity. They know the culture deck they invested in is aspirational, not diagnostic. If that's you, CEO, CHRO, talent leader who has been running these instruments long enough to fill the gap between the reading and the reality, the ORI is the instrument you've been looking for. I want to end with a point of all this. Diagnosis is not the work. Design is the work. The ORI measures what your team does when the day goes wrong. And if you don't know that number, you don't have a diagnostic. You have a summary, a feel.